Most people who budget religiously still end up broke. They track every dollar, cut back on coffee, split expenses down to the penny, and somehow still watch their bank account empty out month after month. Why does budgeting not work for most people? Because the problem isn't a lack of discipline. The problem is that budgeting treats money as a behavior problem when it's actually a structural one. By the end of this video, the real mechanism behind financial stability will become clear, and it has almost nothing to do with tracking expenses. What schools don't teach is this: money doesn't care about intentions. It responds to design. Budgeting fails because it attempts to control cash flow through restriction instead of direction. What is the biggest problem with budgeting? It relies on constant self-control inside a system that is designed for spending. The average person earns money, deposits it into a checking account, and then tries to stop themselves from spending it. This is the equivalent of filling a bucket with holes and then watching it carefully, hoping the water doesn't leak out. The attention is real, the effort is real, but the structure guarantees failure. Money sitting in a checking account has exactly one job: to be spent. Accounts are designed for transactions, not accumulation. The moment income lands in a transactional account, it enters a system optimized for outflow. Rent, subscriptions, groceries, gas, unexpected costs, they all pull from the same pool. No amount of willpower changes the fact that the design itself creates pressure to spend. This is why the wealthiest individuals never budget in the traditional sense. Do wealthy people budget? Not the way most people think. They don't track lattes or argue over grocery bills. Instead, they separate money by function before it ever becomes available to spend. Income is divided immediately and automatically into distinct categories: expenses, savings, investments, reserves. Each category lives in a separate container with a separate purpose. Money for rent cannot become money for entertainment. Money for investing cannot become money for emergencies. The system removes decision-making from the equation. There is no daily battle with temptation because the money that could be spent impulsively no longer exists in the spending account. The difference between someone who builds wealth and someone who doesn't often comes down to whether money is handled reactively or structurally. Why can't I stick to a budget? Because reactive systems require constant effort and perfect discipline. Structural systems require a one-time setup and then run in the background indefinitely. Reactive handling means responding to expenses as they appear, making trade-offs in real time, and hoping there's something left over. Structural handling means deciding in advance where every dollar goes and automating that decision so it happens without thought. One method drains mental energy, the other preserves it. Here's what happens when income is not immediately separated. The full amount sits visible in a single account. That visibility creates psychological availability. Even someone with strong self-control will begin to treat the balance as spendable. A car repair, a dinner out, a sale on something needed eventually, all of these feel reasonable because the money is right there. The budget says no, but the account says yes. The conflict between what someone intends to do and what the system allows them to do creates friction. Over time, friction leads to failure, not because the person lacks discipline, but because they are fighting the architecture of their own financial setup. Contrast this with automatic separation. Income arrives and is immediately split. 10% moves to long-term investments. Another 10% goes to an emergency fund. Fixed expenses like rent and utilities are set aside in a bills account. What remains in the primary checking account is truly discretionary. What is the best alternative to budgeting? This system. There is no guilt spending it because everything else has already been handled. There is no need to track it obsessively because the important money has already been protected. The system creates clarity. Clarity removes decision fatigue. And decision fatigue is what kills most budgets. The wealthiest also understand that expenses are not inherently bad. The goal is not to spend as little as possible. The goal is to ensure that spending happens after wealth-building actions have already occurred. Pay yourself first is not a motivational slogan. It is an operational principle. It means structuring cash flow so that savings and investments are locked in before discretionary access is even possible. This is why high earners can live comfortably while still accumulating wealth, and why low earners who budget meticulously often feel stuck. It's not about income level, it's about sequence and structure. Budgeting assumes the problem is overspending. Is budgeting actually effective? only in the short term and only when discipline is high. But the real problem is understructure. Money flows toward the path of least resistance. If that path leads to spending, it will be spent. If that path is blocked and rerouted toward accumulation, it will accumulate. Behavior follows structure. Structure does not follow behavior. The shift required is simple but not commonly understood. Stop trying to manage money manually. Build a system that manages it automatically. Separate by function. Automate by priority. Let the structure do the work the budget was never designed to do. This is what schools don't teach. This is how money really works. More videos in this series will continue unpacking the mechanisms behind wealth that remain invisible to most. Subscribe to keep learning what the system assumes everyone already knows.